A widowed wife, a vengeful mother, a queen, and a British national heroine who represents a struggle for justice and independence. Today's video will be about Boudica, or Boadicea, who was a queen of the ancient British Iceni tribe, who led a failed uprising against the conquering forces of the Roman Empire in AD 60 or 61. Most of what we know about Boudica comes from the pens of the Roman historians Tacitus and Dio, neither of whom were her contemporaries. Tacitus is considered more reliable, however, as his source was his father-in-law, who was a governor of Britain at the time and was involved in fighting Boudica's revolt. This means that little is known of Boudica's early life in the years prior to the Roman conquest. Estimates have her born between 25 to 30 CE into a noble family in the southeast of present-day England. The early physical description of Boudica comes from Dio. Although it may not be accurate, it leaves readers with the impression that Boudica was a determined war leader. In stature, she was very tall, in appearance most terrifying, in the glance of her eye most fierce, and her voice was harsh. A great mass of the tawniest hair fell to her hips. Around her neck was a large golden necklace, and she wore a tunic of divers colours, over which a thick mantle was fastened with a brooch. This was her invariable attire, wrote Dio, who added that she clutched a spear when she spoke to her people. Boudica was the consort of Prasutagus, king of the Iceni, a tribe who inhabited what is now the English county of Norfolk, parts of the neighbouring counties of Cambridgeshire, Suffolk and Lincolnshire. They produced some of the earliest known British Celtic coins as well. Prasutagus may have been one of the 11 kings who surrendered to Claudius following the Roman conquest in 43, or he may have been installed as king following the defeat of a rebellion of the Iceni in 47. As an ally of Rome, his tribe were allowed to remain nominally independent, and to ensure this, Prasutagus made his two daughters as well as the Roman Emperor Nero his heirs. The Romans ignored the will, and the kingdom was absorbed into the province of Britannia. Catus Decianus, procurator of Britain, was sent to secure the Iceni kingdom for Rome. This began much like it usually does. The Romans began by depriving the nobles of their land and plundering the kingdom. By the words of Tacitus, Boudica was then flogged publicly before her people, and her daughters were assaulted. All this led to the revolt of the Iceni under the leadership of Boudica. Tacitus recorded Boudica's promise of vengeance after this last violation. Nothing is safe from Roman pride and arrogance. They will deface the sacred and will deflower our virgins. Win the battle or perish. That is what I, a woman, will do. These abuses are not mentioned in Roman historian Dio's accounts. He instead claims that 3 different causes for the rebellion: the recalling of loans that were given to the Britons by Seneca, Canus Catus's confiscation of money formerly loaned to the Britons by the Emperor Claudius, and Boudica's own entreaties. The Iceni thought that the loans had been repaid by gift exchange. Dio also attributed to Boudica a speech addressed to her people. The speech includes a reminder to her allies, the Trinovantes, about how much better their life was before Roman occupation, stressing that wealth cannot be enjoyed under slavery, and placing the blame upon herself for not expelling the Romans as they had done when Julius Caesar had come for their land. The willingness of the barbarians to sacrifice a higher quality of living under the Romans in exchange for their freedom and personal liberty was an important part of what Dio considered to be a motivation for the rebellions. Part of the speech Dio gives Boudica to her followers reads, "Have we not been robbed entirely of most of our possessions, and those the greatest, while for those that remain we pay taxes? Besides pasturing and tilling for them, all our other possessions, do we not pay a yearly tribute for our own very bodies? How much better it would be to have been sold to masters once, for all than, possessing empty titles of freedom, to have to ransom ourselves every year. How much better to have been slain, and to have perished, than to go about with a tax on our heads. Among the rest of mankind, death frees even those who are in slavery to others. Only in the case of the Romans did the very dead remain alive for their profit. Why is it that, though none of us have any money, and how indeed could we, or where would we get it, we are stripped and despoiled like a murderer's victims? And why should the Romans be expected to display moderation as time goes on, when they have behaved towards us in this fashion at the very outset, when all men show consideration even for the beast they have newly captured? Other Iceni chiefs had suffered in a very similar manner, and their families were treated like slaves, so it's not surprising that these outrages provoked the Iceni, the Trinobantes, and other tribes to rebel against the Romans. The first target of the rebellion was Camulodunum, which is now modern Colchester, a Roman colony for retired soldiers. A Roman temple had been erected there to Claudius at great expense to the local population. Combined with brutal treatment of the Britons by the veterans, this had caused resentment towards the Romans. The Iceni and the Trinobantes comprised an army of 120,000 men. Dio claimed that Boudica called upon the British goddess of victory Andraste to aid her army. Once the revolt had begun, the only Roman troops available to provide assistance, aside from the few within the colony, were 200 auxiliaries located in London, who were not equipped to fight Boudica's army. Camulodunum was captured by the rebels. Those inhabitants who survived the initial attack took refuge in the temple of Claudius for 2 days before they were killed. Quintus Petilius Cerelis, then commanding the Legio IX Hispana, attempted to relieve Camulodunum, but suffered an overwhelming defeat. The infantry with him were all killed, and only the commander and some of his cavalry escaped. After this disaster, Catus Sisanus, whose behaviour had provoked the rebellion, fled abroad to Gaul. Suetonius was leading a campaign against the island of Mona, off the coast of North Wales. Upon hearing the news of the Iceni uprising, he left a garrison on Mona and returned to deal with Boudica. He moved quickly with a force of men through hostile territory to Londinium, which he had reached before the arrival of Boudica's army, but outnumbered he decided to abandon the town to the rebels, who burned it down after torturing and killing everyone who had remained. The rebels also sacked Verulamium, modern St Albans, northwest of London, though the extent of its destruction is unclear. Dio and Tacitus also reported that around 80,000 people were said to have been killed by the rebels. According to Tacitus, the Britons had no interest in taking the Roman population as prisoners, only in slaughter by gibbet, fire or cross. Dio also adds that the noblest women were impaled on spikes and had their breasts cut off and sewn to their mouths, to the accompaniment of sacrifices, banquets and wanton behaviour in sacred places, particularly the groves of Andraste. But again, this was all written after the fact, so if this did or didn't happen, we are unsure, as Dio was also writing a century later than all the people who were actually there. From there, Suetonius regrouped his forces. He amassed an army of almost 10,000 men at an unidentified location and took a stand in a defile with a wood behind them. The Romans used the terrain to their advantage, launching javelins at the Britons before advancing in a wedge-shaped formation and deploying cavalry. Also, Tacitus notes that Boudica made a tactical mistake in placing her supply wagons close to the front lines, blocking her troops when they had to retreat. The Roman army was heavily outnumbered based on Dio, who records that the rebels numbered 230,000. But Boudica's army was crushed, and according to Tacitus, neither the women nor the animals were spared. The battle over, Tacitus said that Boudica took poison to avoid being captured, while Dio said that she had died of an illness, possibly from a wound, after which she was given a lavish burial. It has been argued that these accounts are not mutually exclusive, however. Paulinus then set about re-subjugating the implicated areas by fire and sword, and this extended not only to the most hostile people, but even to those who had simply wavered in their loyalty. The Romans knew that any overall loss to Boudica would have been disastrous. Indeed, you can see this in their response after Paulinus' final victory. This included drafting in 2,000 more legionaries from Germany, together with 1,000 auxiliary cavalry and 8 units of auxiliary foot to help stamp out the last flames of resistance. This was then carried out with such vigour in the Iceni homelands of North Norfolk that the region remained for many years underdeveloped compared to the rest of the province. Britain would remain part of the British Empire until the 5th century AD, when the western half of the empire collapsed. While Boudica's rebellion failed to drive the Romans out of Britain, the Iceni queen has become something of a modern-day heroine. Boudica has become an icon of British national history and is now a symbol not only of British freedom, but also of women's power. She's been painted and sculpted. She has starred in films and has been the protagonist of numerous books, both of an academic and fictional nature. She has had a storied posthumous life. As her various preparations show, as with any aspect of culture, history can be both political and personal. And that about wraps things up. Thank you if you made it this far into the video, and lovely to be back with hopefully a somewhat regular schedule. I'm currently in the process of moving house and out for the first time, so we may have a few hiccups here and there, but it does mean that I will have a lot more freedom to record like this. Please don't forget to share, like and subscribe to the channel, and if you haven't already, I will see you next time. Bye!